Let's talk for a moment about calculating crosswind component now. You're going to see this chart a lot. I imagine it's in your POH. This is the actual FAA written test image that you'll use for private, instrument, and commercial pilot if you choose to go through all those ratings. Let me ask you a few questions and teach you how to go through this chart. What we're trying to figure out is, with every wind, short of a wind that's straight down the runway, we have some aspect, some portion of it shows up as a crosswind. And we need to know our aircraft's maximum crosswind component and calculate the crosswind component for that day. So here's the question. What is the headwind component for landing on runway 18 if the tower reports wind as 220 at 30 knots? Well, hopefully as a private pilot, if you ever hear 30 knots, you say, listen, I'm staying on the ground today, but for our example, we'll go through it. So let's pretend now that runway 18 is that 0 degree mark on the far left side that you see there. Now what we need to do is count off how far off is the wind from the runway. So that would be 190, there's 200, 30 degrees is 210, and 40 degrees is 220. The wind is 40 degrees off our runway. Now we can take our wind velocity right there that we see of 30 knots and draw it straight out to that wind velocity arc. You see those different arcs there? There's a 10, there's a 20, there's a 30, and you see how they arc out there. What I did is I drew a line down that 40 degree mark to that 30 degree wind velocity arc. From there, I can draw a line straight down to get a crosswind component of about 18 or 19 knots and draw it straight to the left to get a headwind component of about 22, 23 knots. So, if I'm landing or taking off 18 and the winds are 220 at 30, I'm going to feel like I have a crosswind of about 18 knots is what it'll feel like, and I'll feel like I have a headwind of about 23, 24 knots. So when I'm calculating my takeoff distance, I know how much of that wind will feel like a headwind, and when I'm looking at my maximum crosswind component, I know how much of that wind will actually feel like a crosswind. Let's look at another one kind of asked a little bit differently, and this is actually a question from the FAA written test. What is the max wind velocity for a 30 degree crosswind if the airplane's max crosswind component is 12 knots? This is good to know. If I'm flying a Cessna 150 and the POH says my maximum crosswind component is only 12 knots, I can know how much velocity based on degrees I can handle and have a rough sketch, kind of a rule of thumb type reference. So same sort of thing here. There's my runway. Let's work through this now. My wind velocity, we said, or my crosswind component is 12 knots. So I start at the bottom of my chart with 12 knots and I draw straight up to that 30 degree mark there that you see, that 30 degree mark. I'm finding where 12 knots intersects 30 degrees, and I come out to a wind velocity, I'm looking at the actual arcs there, of roughly about 24 knots. Again, we're not reading left, not reading right. I'm looking at the actual arcs there to tell. That's what I'm looking for, and I come out with roughly about 24 knots. It's important you get familiar with this chart, not only for your written test if you haven't done it yet, but certainly for your check ride and for being a safe pilot. My challenge to you is find out what your aircraft's maximum crosswind component is and have that number and know it cold for your check ride and for your safety moving forward as a private pilot.